Now, the first thing that I would want to say is that there seems to be a very difficult tension, and the tension has to do with this irresolvability of these twin dynamics. And I think a lot of people end up wanting to go to one of them rather than the other, and then they sort of just follow it out there. But they're going to need to deal with this basic tension. Here's the tension: that on the one hand, we want to be able to say and recognize that people can be racist without recognizing that they are, or they can do a racist action without realizing that that action was racist. On the other hand, we got to be able to have to say that people can perceive racism when it in fact has not occurred. Again, people can perceive racism when it in fact has not occurred. And those are inseparable. In some way, the second one is a subset of the first one. That is, because people can be racist without realizing that they're doing it, people can perceive racism where it has not in fact occurred. It gets very, very difficult. And I think that's a tension that is going to require humility and maturity. And if we're going to make a forward movement in the discussion, people are going to have to be humbled by both of those facts, be mature, and try to listen to the other person in an open dialogue. I think this tension, it can't be resolved. You can't just stick it on one side. You have to recognize both sides there. Okay. Now, I think I want to get at this a little further. And this was a post that was going through Facebook. My guess is a good number of people have seen this. This is Denzel Washington, and he's being quoted. I'm not sure if he's actually said this, or he realized that he's being posted up this way, but it says, "This is how you stop racism." And then it has the sentence, "An innocent black man was murdered by a corrupt white cop." And they cross out black and white. And I think it's a well-intended, well-meaning effort. I think some person wants to say, look, in order to stop racism, you got to get beyond race and just think of people as people. Think of the individuals as actual individuals or as human beings, but don't think about them as a particular race of person. Unfortunately, that's just not going to work. It's overly simplistic, and it's more complicated than that. And it's much more complicated than that. I think people realize it too, the more they think about it. In fact, color blindness, the strategy of color blindness, is often used by the group in power. If you're a dominant group and you already retain something like the power, you have a vested interest in saying, well, I don't even pay attention to skin color. But that can't even be right. I mean, look at this example. If you actually strike out the sentence and you strike out the words black and white from the sentence, and you read it, an innocent man was murdered by a corrupt cop. At this point, you're not stopping racism. You're not even talking about race or racism. You're talking about corruption. You're talking about police brutality. You're talking about something else. So how could you possibly talk about racism? Now you might say, well, that's the way to stop racism, is to get somehow behind it, to get somehow on the other side of it. But look at how problematic that is. Why use Denzel Washington as the image, as if somehow he represents what black people think? I mean, that's a problem. The fact that this image is used in accompaniment with a message, and people knowing that, again, that it seems more of a legitimate claim to be making if coming from a black man. Well, I thought we weren't paying attention to the color of the skin. See, it's again, I think it's well-intentioned, but people aren't realizing the complexity. I mean, just for argument's sake, imagine if all of a sudden you see the same statement, but now the image is Stephen Miller. I think we don't experience the message the same way. That is, it's much more persuasive. And I would add that I saw the Denzel Washington on a good number of white folks, Facebook pages, and you could see that, again, they were wanting to say, let's end racism. And this was again, is well-intentioned, but it's much more complicated than that. And if it's not more complicated, someone would have to explain why exactly a particular black man was being used to sell that message if color blindness was what we're after all along, right? You can see the sort of contradiction and the problem there. Now, I think to go further into this, this discussion about all lives matter as the response to Black Lives Matter. Now, again, I saw it on Facebook, so I have to give credit there. But people had images of Jesus where Jesus is saying, "Blessed are the poor," and then one of the apostles is like, "No, Jesus, everyone is blessed." And you got Jesus going like this. It's like, yeah, when people say Black Lives Matter, they're not denying that all lives matter. I think we all know that all lives matter. Yes, all lives matter. That's obvious. But when they're saying Black Lives Matter, they're saying people, certain sections of people, are claiming that Black lives don't matter, or they're acting as if Black lives don't matter. You want to see the specifics for the specifics that they are. Imagine that you have a spouse, you're married, and your husband, your wife, they come home and they had a horrible day. The boss was mean, berated them, maybe verbally abused them in front of other people, threatened to take their job away. And maybe they were actually physically threatened by other people at work. And they just really had a harassed day. And they come home and they say to you, "I've had just a horrible day. The world's not treating me well at all. Do you love me?" And your response is, "Well, I love everyone." Yeah, exactly. No, you're not responding to if you say "I love everyone," you're just not responding to the exigency and the reality of what's happening. And I'm not sure, I think most people can see that that's just an inappropriate response to what's happening. I think the last thing I would want to say to sort of wrap this up is, I have a fair amount of friends who are, they don't work directly with any people of color. They don't really have any Black or, people of color friends. Their lives are largely hanging around other white people. And I don't think they think of themselves as racist. In fact, I think a lot of them, they're carrying signs here in the protests, and they are really, really good people. But I think one of the things that I would encourage everyone to really notice here is that sometimes some of these people get accused of being racist. See, now we're back to that very first point. Right, so this is where that tension comes back. But they get accused of being racist or of not recognizing their white privilege. They say, "Well, you've had a lot of white privilege. You've had a lot of white privilege." And they say, no, I haven't had any white privilege. And again, they want to deny that they've ever had racist thoughts or been racist in any way. And I think the thing that's most interesting is that some of these folks I've seen get very angry. They've gotten upset. Viscerally upset. You could see that they were worked up and kind of shouting, "I don't want to have to put up with people telling me that I'm racist. I'm not racist. I'm a good person. I do a lot of good stuff. And this is really insulting. And it's enraging to think that people are thinking I'm racist when I'm not." And what's so fascinating is what's upsetting them is that other people are wrongfully attributing to them characteristics that they not only disavow, but they want to claim are false. They're false. And they say, "That's not me at all." But that is exactly the feeling that so many Black men in the US feel. They go in public and they have to deal with reactions, responses, forms of profiling and discriminatory practices that amount to that person being wrongly accused, being wrongly thought of as a criminal, as a drug dealer, as just a bad person, someone not to be trusted. And imagine having to deal with that day in, day out, of having other people attribute to you those characteristics that you disavow and say, "That's not me," but you have to deal with other people continuously doing that to you. So I encourage anyone who has ever been upset because they feel like people have wrongly accused them of being racist. And if it's made you upset because you've said, "Look, I'm really not racist," try to imagine what it's like day in, day out with people wrongfully accusing you of being a kind of person that you just know you're not. It's very, very frustrating. Okay, thank you.